You're watching the Aramco 2022 F1 car reveal series. Past achievements mean nothing. We start from zero. That was team principal Toto Wolff's declaration at the launch of the new Mercedes F1 W13, the car he hopes will continue its run of success despite the biggest set of rule changes in Formula 1 history. The new Mercedes, back in its Silver Arrows livery after 2 years in black, was revealed prior to being shaken down at a stormy Silverstone, with George Russell the first to get behind the wheel during its filming day. Lewis Hamilton then took over on his first appearance since losing the 2021 Drivers' Championship in last year's controversial Abu Dhabi finale. Hamilton put to bed fears he might walk away from F1, with the action announced by the FIA on Thursday evidently satisfying both driver and team. So after 2 months of uncertainty, he will fight for an 8th World Championship. But the key question is, will the Mercedes W13 be up to it? With Wolff saying that the team is treating its latest creation with its traditional scepticism. After all, despite its success, Mercedes takes nothing for granted. As always, our technical expert Gary Anderson has taken a close look at the car, as has our technical illustrator Rosario Juliana. And the first impression is that it's an elegant interpretation of the regulations. Viewed from the front, the shape of the front wing, which sweeps upwards from the outboard end then back down dramatically, clears a path for the airflow to feed to the all-important openings at the front of the floor. These feed the crucial Venturi tunnels of the ground effect car. It has tightly packaged side pods that shrink wrap the internal components, narrowing quickly to feed the Coke bottle area, with the surface shape sweeping down to augment that effect. According to technical director Mike Elliott, Mercedes has taken another step with the compact packaging of the side pods and engine cover this year. So the big picture is of a sleek, sharp design that is very obviously aiming to maximise the airflow to the Venturis and feed clean airflow around the side pods and to the rear of the car. It has certainly met with Gary Anderson's approval. So let's have a look at some of the key areas in detail. With the shape of the front wing flaps leaving a clear flow to the front of the floor, Mercedes does not have the slot gap between the nose and the bottom element we've seen from other teams. This element is mounted directly to the nose, which is less pointy than what we've seen from Ferrari. Behind that is a pushrod front suspension. Note that the track rod is in line with the forward leg of the wishbone to minimise airflow blockage, and also has a small change of section and angle halfway along its length to help optimise the airflow. The airflow then hits the front of the floor and side pods. The leading edge is wider than on some cars, for example a Ferrari, meaning the angle of attack of the airflow will not be so critical. This should make underfloor performance more robust and consistent. We can also see the vanes in detail. There's an outer vane to reduce the turbulence caused by the front tyre, and 3 more inside the Venturi tunnel to divide this into sections. The leading edge of the tunnel also steps up as it goes inside. The internal vanes twist outwards dramatically to turn as much airflow as possible out of the side of the underfloor. This means the raised internal section is the airflow through the Venturi the underfloor and diffuser works with. On the outside of the side pod, there's the typical large turning vane, but the leading edge of the side pod itself is relatively simple thanks to the size of the radiator inlet and not as cleanly blended into the rest of the side pod as it could be as a result. It's possible this could be an area for development. The large inlet means the Mercedes also doesn't have the biggest side pod undercut, although this could also evolve in the short term. But the side pod shape is exactly as you would expect it based on the trend for tight packaging, eschewing the direction taken by some others, including customer team Aston Martin. The components underneath are tightly and neatly wrapped, and it sweeps inwards and downwards to the Coke bottle. Mercedes has also brought back the corrugated forward floor exit that it used early last season. This will be at the tail end of the internal floor splitters and will act as an exit in this area to help create a small front corner diffuser in its own right that pulls some of the initial airflow out of these small corrugations. The airbox intake is a rectangular shape, but there's a triangular rollover bar inside the opening. This creates 3 internal ducts, one of which we'll call the turbocharger. At the back of the car, the Coke bottle area has plenty of space to feed the upper surface of the diffuser and the beam wing. But if you look higher up to the engine cover, it is wider than in recent years thanks to the split plenum arrangement. Gone is what Chief Technical Officer James Allison described last year as the rather sexy looking bulge needed to accommodate that split plenum. The rear suspension is the common pull rod design, while the rear wing is more of a W shape rather than being the conventional V shape. The outer ends are at a similar height to the middle, meaning there will be more airflow spillage off the sides and along the end plates. Under the skin, the 2022 specification Mercedes power unit has undergone more changes than in any year since the 1.6 litre V6 turbo engines were brought in 2014. This is thanks to the imminent engine freeze and the introduction of E10 fuel. So the Mercedes definitely looks the part and the team has the track record. Only the stopwatch will reveal whether it's maintained its high standards and will continue to be at the sharp end for another season in 2022. But it would be a surprise if Mercedes wasn't. You're watching the Aramco 2022 F1 Car Reveal Series. Mercedes has achieved unprecedented dominance in Formula 1 since 2014, winning 15 out of 16 drivers and constructors' championships, and coming within a lap of making it a full house last year. It leapt to the front through the 2014 rule changes that introduced the 1.6 litre V6 turbo hybrid engines. But given Chief Technical Officer James Allison describes this year's rule changes as the biggest since he first came into F1 with Benetton back in 1991, there's the risk the new regulations could derail Mercedes. The team's track record suggests it will be equal to the challenge. After hitting the front in 2014, it stayed there in 2017 when F1 introduced wider, higher downforce cars. It was still on top in 2019 when the front wings were simplified to make them less sensitive to turbulence and mitigate outwash. But last year's set of 4 small but significant rule changes, most importantly the triangular cut in the floor, did hit Mercedes hard. However, it would be unfair to say that this is indicative of a failure to adapt, given it was locked in to the low-rate concept the rules made work less well thanks to the requirements to carry over the majority of the 2020 car. So we can be confident Mercedes is up to the challenge of the technical regulations, but there are other complications that make this a more complex task. Firstly, the introduction of the cost cap last year has hit Mercedes more than most. This year, the cost cap baseline figure drops to $140 million and, like its main rivals, that has led to restructuring and staff being moved into other areas, including the America's Cup project with the Ineos Britannia team. Secondly, this car has been designed under the restrictions of the aerodynamic testing handicap system. This was introduced in 2021 and allocated wind tunnel runs and CFD items based on a reverse sliding scale, meaning the teams at the top of the championship get the least. This scale is reset every 6 months, so Mercedes and Red Bull had the same tight restrictions last year. In addition to this, Mercedes, like Red Bull, also had to balance 2022 developments with a push for the 2021 title. The aero testing rules will have an even bigger impact this year, with the steps between teams doubled in size. So Mercedes, as constructors champions last year, will have the least wind tunnel and CFD test resources for the first half of this year at least. The combination of new rules, the cost cap and aero testing restrictions means an even bigger focus on efficiency. This year will be a big test of how well Mercedes has adapted to massive behind-the-scenes changes in the way it operates. History tells us Mercedes will take all of this in its stride. If it does, it can extend a run of success that is already unprecedented in F1 history. Mercedes has been the most successful engine supplier during the 1.6 litre V6 turbo hybrid era, winning 113 out of 160 races. That's 71% of the total. But there were times last season when the Honda engine that powered the Red Bull had the advantage, before Mercedes rallied in the second half of the year. But in 2022, the engines are frozen in 2 phases, with deadlines in both March and September, with the homologation then locked until the end of 2025. Mercedes, like all the engine manufacturers, along with fuel supplier Petronas, has the added advantage of adapting to the change to E10 fuel this year. In 2021, 5.75% of the fuel had to be bio-components, but this year that increases to 10% and it must be renewable ethanol. Mercedes engine boss Howell Thomas describes this as the largest engine regulation change since 2014. Andrew Green, Chief Technical Officer of Mercedes customer team Aston Martin, has said there were minimal changes to the engine architecturally. But the demands of the new regulations has led to packaging tweaks, with what Mercedes has described as a fundamental relook at things. This is the most important year for Mercedes in terms of power unit development since the 1.6-litre V6 turbo hybrid engines first appeared. History would suggest it should lock in strong performance and perhaps even an advantage, but given the improvements promised from the Red Bull badged Honda engines, Ferrari and Renault, it faces some serious competition. Mercedes has shown itself capable of rising to the challenge in terms of car and engine development over the past 8 years. Most likely it will do the same this year, but the big rule changes means there's still the chance that it could be knocked off its very lofty perch.